When discussing Alaska's fiscal future, we are discussing my future, we are discussing the problems that I am going to face as an adult, we are discussing the welfare of all Alaska's citizens. Our state is in such a position that we cannot sit around and continue to discuss the options that we may have. We must start putting them into play, or the consequences of our procrastination will be evident. Alaska's legislators must explore all viable options to resolve this economic turmoil we are rolling through, while keeping in mind the well-being of the people they are serving. Capping the permanent fund dividend at $1,000 per individual is a feasible step in the right direction of solving our mammoth deficit for two main reasons. The PFD's original purposes allow us to use this resource in times of financial uncertainty, and a steady source of income would be provided. Established in 1976, the permanent fund was created with a primary purpose to save portions of the revenues generated by Alaska's oil reserves for the future needs of the state. An initial second purpose was to put money in savings so the legislature would not overspend or waste these public funds. Essentially, this money in the bank and check we receive in October is there as a backup to economic crises Alaska may fall into. We are currently living the future needs of the state that the money inside the permanent fund was established for originally. It is time now to cap the PFD, to allocate this resource to the pressing issue that is our fiscal future that does not look all too bright. Opponents of tampering the PFD argue that another purpose for the establishment of the fund was to grant us our right from the Alaska Constitution of a distribution of the profits of our state's natural resources. The claim is made that any dip into the permanent fund proves unconstitutional because of Article 9, Section 15 of our state's constitution. But even in the 1700s, with the social contract theory, we were smart enough to know that by giving up some of our rights and entitlements, we can gain a lot more societally. Quite frankly, I would rather see a smaller check in October than see another student in my English class due to education cuts. I would rather see state troopers patrolling to keep our state safe than have money to buy a virtual reality this October, even if it seems pretty damn cool. Capping the PFD is a viable option because the original purposes permit us to use these funds in these times of financial instability, and although it is my right to get my dividend, I am willing to sacrifice some of it for the welfare of my state, and you should be willing too. Moreover, by capping the permanent fund dividend, a new source of revenue would become available for Alaska to use to combat the monster that is our $4 billion deficit. We see that the average PFD given is $1,150 according to the Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation. This cap of $1,000 is not far from the average, and only $22 under the 2016 dividend. Looking at the big picture, when we take into account that Alaska has a population nearing 740,000 people, what we see is that all these little dollars multiplied by each of us adds up to be a stream of revenue that is a practical and possible solution. Important to note is that Alaska's citizens are on board with this proposal. In a poll conducted by Strategies 360 in 2015, Alaskans polled stated that in efforts to aid the closing of the budget deficit, putting a cap on the yearly amount of permanent fund dividends is an option they are willing to explore and go forward with. Additionally, it is arguable that the money would be spent more wisely for public programs than it would be in the hands of citizens. Sure, there are Alaskans who are assisted by their PFD check with day-to-day bills and expenses, but companies all across Alaska have their PFD sales for people to indulge themselves in luxury items. Alaskans notice the cuts that happen by our legislature. As a student in Alaska, having an English class of 35 students shows me that education is being cut. As a citizen of Alaska, having sidewalks and streets that are not kept shows me that maintenance is being cut. The revenue that could possibly be acquired from a cap to the PFD could easily be used to work against cuts and work against the deficit. Of course, this strategy alone will not be the solution to our gloomy fiscal future, but this accompanied with other options in play will work adamantly to combat our economic turmoil. To put a cap of $1,000 on the PFD is a decision that would be made for the greater good and would largely benefit our state. In Governor Walker's 2016 State of the Budget, he stated that if we do not act now to face the situation, there are more dire consequences to be seen in the near future, one of which is that the permanent fund dividend goes to zero in less than 4 years. By capping the PFD now, we work to avoid not having it at all. The longer we wait to solidify a plan to battle our budget deficit, the worse this problem becomes for me, as the next generation of adults in Alaska, to deal with. Thank you.
The use of the permanent fund dividend is a remarkably sensitive topic to Alaska citizens, especially the Alaskans who do not have high-paying jobs or that live in villages with few streams of revenue available. The PFD is a substantial resource of income for Alaskans when it comes to a state that has a higher than average cost of living. We should not cut the PFD at $1,000 for two reasons. Rural Alaskans will be disproportionately negatively affected, and increased poverty levels will be seen. Alaskans in rural areas will be poorly affected by a cut to the permanent fund dividend. Alaskan villages often rely on the PFD due to the scarcity of jobs and unstable economy. Seemingly enough, those out in small towns in Alaska are time and time again underrepresented in legislative decisions that impact them just as much, if not more, than those in urbanized parts of the state. While there is bountiful discussion on how the PFD is a waste simply because it is often spent on luxury items here in Anchorage, that is not the case in Alaskan villages. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics that are reported on 29 areas in Alaska, 22 of them have average weekly wages below the national average. However, Anchorage is in the top 20% in the nation in average weekly wages. Bob Hafner, president of the Nome Chamber of Commerce, stated that the dividend is a big chunk of their income for a lot of people out here in the bush. When you take a villager's income and compare it to somewhere like Anchorage, it's a big difference. He goes on to say that the Alaskans there depend on subsistence and that the PFD is used to help them get supplies to do that. However, with the PFD being cut, they will not be able to buy supplies to aid them. Additionally, the Alaska Public Media published an article detailing the uses of the October checks on people in villages. Mary Andrew of Talisac said that she wouldn't be able to pay her lights or buy food. Diapers, wipes, food, and my son's college savings is what Peter Utteryux from Scammon Bay said his PFD goes to. This helps illustrate how we may see that the PFD is something we have in Alaska that should not be tampered with because it may not be as needed to urban citizens than it might be for rural citizens. The cap on the PFD will not only affect the families there, but the businesses as well. Hafner also said that the businesses there already started to feel the effects when people were not buying as much as before due to the cut in 2016's PFD checks. Essentially, what this means is that the economy that is already weak for small businesses in Alaskan villages and will only continue to weaken due to local demand. The perspective of rural Alaska is a point of view that must be understood and represented when discussing any possible fiscal solution. Due to high levels of unemployment and the reliance on the dividends as a basic income, the consequences they will face if the PFD is capped will be harshly felt. On top of Alaskan villages being affected for the worst, Alaskans in poverty will be negatively affected as well. To Alaskans living in poverty, the PFD comes as a great gift. A payday of $8,000 is what a family of 4 would have received if the PFD was not cut. It's a considerable amount to the 20% of Alaskan families whose income averages $35,000 a year or less. According to the United States Census Bureau, a little more than 10% of Alaskans fall at or below the poverty line. Tying this back to the first reason in opposition, we do see that Anchorage and other urban areas have a poverty level that stands at 11%, whereas rural areas see a significantly higher level, reaching 20%. What this shows is that Alaskans under the poverty line will be negatively affected by a cut in the PFD, and that is a lot of people that will be affected. A cut in the permanent fund dividend looks like it would help Alaska and its people. However, what is going to happen, and is already happening, is that rural Alaskans and Alaskans under the poverty line will be dramatically negatively affected. In conclusion, we should not cut the permanent fund dividend because we see more harms to the people of Alaska than we see benefits. Thank you.